journeys now.
Which is the other one that comes over here?
Philip lives in
Philip.
Oklahoma City.
Oh, okay.
Both of them live in the States now,
Oh,
so.
okay. So they won't be doing that anymore?
Jerry still comes. He comes usually once a year. He came earlier this year,
Okay.
and you may have been gone if you missed it. But he was, I think, April,
Oh, and
May.
isn't his wife the one that does the art?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I might get a hold of him about her. I got out of cards.
yeah. We can get a hold of her for you if you want. So.
Wait till I get back from Missouri. I'm kind of full right now. I'm busy.
Yeah, yeah. We're on Exodus 15 tonight, the Song of Moses. The first, probably 3/4 of this chapter tonight is actually a song. They came through the Red Sea. All the Egyptians were drowned. As I was going through the commentary, kind of surprising to me, I guess it kind of makes sense, but I thought Pharaoh didn't get caught up in it, but the commentator seemed to indicate he did. So that would make sense as far as why the Egyptians finally quit pursuing him, because it killed Pharaoh and killed everybody else, all those with it. So I'm not real sure, it wasn't real clear in there. It said all the Egyptians, but anyway, I guess I've seen too many movies where the general sends his people into
That
harm's
doesn't mean
way.
the women and children, does it? Or just
These were soldiers, Egyptian soldiers.
Just the soldiers, okay.
The Egyptian soldiers that was in their
Innocent
chariots.
all, you wonder.
Well, it was all the chariots, all the Egyptians that was with them. So, and that was their army that was going after them to take care of them, the 600 chariots and.
But they all had families and so,
Well, they did, but they had their chance too,
Yeah.
several times. And as they came out of the Red Sea, the Spirit moved upon them, and Moses sang this song, and the people sang with him. Now, I would say it's more of a ballad. What I would say is a ballad. It tells us a story. And this is one way, as they have these songs, and they are led by the Spirit to put these songs together, they're also history. We've talked about that a lot, that this is for them a memory. And this way, this is one device, a device that they can remember. It's easier if you have a song. Probably a lot of us knew the Bible from the very beginning, and we can still sing it now. Some of the other early songs that we sing, today's kids, they'll know Baby Shark. I don't know if you know that one, but that's Baby Shark is the new one, and some of the others like that. But anyway, let's go ahead. Then sang Moses and the children of Israel this song unto the Lord, and spake, saying, I will sing unto the Lord, for he hath triumphed gloriously. The horse and his rider hath he thrown into the sea. The Lord is my strength and song, and he is become my salvation. He is my God, and I will prepare him an habitation, my father's God, and I will exalt him. The Lord is a man of war, the Lord is his name. Pharaoh's chariots and his host hath he cast into the sea. I guess it says right there, so, well, it says Pharaoh's chariots. His chosen captains also drowned in the Red Sea. The depths have covered them. They sank into the bottom as a stone. So, because of this, and many times when the Spirit would move on the prophets, would move on different people, David, in the Old Testament, when he was moved on by the Spirit, he danced when the ark was coming home, coming back to the Jerusalem. So these are emphasized in these songs, and it makes, like I said, it makes it history. See, God prizes these spontaneous expressions of praise and worship. This was a new song sung unto the Lord. There are moods of the soul that can only be expressed in poetry and music. If you go through all these, this song here, all the different verses, you can really see that it was inspired, because it was nothing about me. as far as Moses. Nothing about the people. It was all about God. It was all about him. This is what God did. This is what he has done. This is the rider was thrown. He has thrown him into the sea. The Lord is my strength and my song. As they were about to get wiped out, the Egyptians pushed them up against the waters. He made a way for them. All these things that's being brought out. He is my salvation. It recognizes we can't save ourselves. All right? That still comes down even into the New Testament times. We can't save ourselves. The Lord is my strength. Verse 6 says, you have overthrown those who rose against you. Verse 6, thy right hand, O Lord, is become glorious in power. Thy right hand, O Lord, hath dashed in pieces of the enemy. Why is it the right hand? Anybody know? Why is, first of all, God's a spirit, and we're attributing human-like features and traits, because that's the only way we know what to do. The Bible tells us we were made in God's images, so image. So we can see that we have hands, we have heads. We're assuming this is what God, even in the spirit, looks like. And when it talks about his right hand, typically the right hand is strength. A lot of people, I don't know what the percentages is, 90% of the people are right-handed. I have to look it up. There's a few of them. My mom was left-handed, and there's a few others left-handed. But a lot of times the right hand is signified by being the strength. So that's why it's talking about here. He's my right hand. He was his right hand has become glorious in power, because that's what's, shown. In the greatness of thine excellency, verse 7, thou hast overthrown them that rose up against thee. Thou sentest forth thy wrath, which consumed them as stubble. And with the blast of thy nostrils, the waters were gathered together. The floods stood upright as a heap, and the depths were congealed in the heart of the sea. The enemy said, I will pursue, I will overtake, I will divide the spoil. My lust shall be satisfied upon them. I will draw my sword, my hand shall destroy them. Thou didst blow thy wind, the sea covered them, and they sank as lead in the mighty waters. So this, what God had came about, what he brought about for them, and with the Egyptians sending to Pharaoh and telling him, hey, they're trapped. This is what God wanted. Because he wanted to show Pharaoh who he was. Show the Egyptian who he was. Many years later, 40 years later, when the Israelites are invading and starting to take over the area, the harlot Rahab, when they went into the first city, she said, we have heard of your exploits and how you drowned the Egyptians in the sea. That's 40 years later. The people of the nations around there heard of what the Israelites, the God of Israel, had done for them over the Egyptians. So this is not just this area. They made it known everywhere. And by repeating these stories and these songs, they are just expressing to God their worship. They're, praising him for bringing them out of this situation. They were caught. They were in a tight space. Here's a few verses that talks about, again, the right hand. Psalms 45:4 talks about God's right hand teaches us. Psalms 48:10, God's right hand is full of righteousness. Psalms 77:10, remembrance of the years of the right hand of the Most High. Psalms 110:1, the Father invites the Son to sit at his right hand. Habakkuk 2:16, the cup of God's judgment is held in his right hand. Ephesians 1:20, Jesus is seated at the right hand of the Father. And that is where the predominance is. That's where the, however you want to say it, the throne, whoever's sitting on the throne, whoever is his right hand man, we always talk about that, that's the one he depends on. That's the one, that's where Jesus was at. He was right there at his beck and call, what God wanted him to do. Verse 11, who is like unto thee, O Lord, among the gods? Who is like thee, glorious in holiness, fearful in praises, doing wonders? Thou stretchest out thy right hand, the earth swallowed them. Thou in thy mercy hast led forth the people, which thou hast redeemed. Thou hast guided them in thy strength, and unto thy holy habitation. So this first part of it, who is like you, O Lord, that just goes right back to what Pharaoh was asking. Who is God? Well, God's telling him, I am God that created everything. I am the God. Said if the people of Egypt still did not know who the Lord was, the people of Israel did. They knew the Lord was not like any of the false gods that Egypt had, or Canaan, or anywhere else. Who is like you, worship should proclaim the superiority of the Lord God over anything else that claims to be God. Israel soon and often forgot this, but we can remember it. And we see that they forget it really quickly. As we continue on in Exodus, we'll see it several times. It happens several times. As a matter of fact, before the end of this chapter, we'll see it again. Verse 14, the people shall hear and be afraid. Sorrow shall take hold on the inhabitants of Palestina. Then the dukes of Edom shall be amazed. The mighty men of Moab, trembling, shall take hold upon them. All the inhabitants of Canaan shall melt away. Fear and dread shall fall upon them by the greatness of thine arm. They shall be as still as a stone, till thy people pass over, O Lord, till the people pass over, which thou hast purchased. Thou shalt bring them in and plant them in the mountain of thine inheritance, in the place, O Lord, which thou hast made for thee to dwell in the sanctuary, O Lord, which thy hands have established. The Lord shall reign forever and ever. Now, if y'all didn't pick up a map back there, they're also back there. You can grab of them. There's two of them, a white one and a colored one. And that helps a little bit. It shows, last week we went over where the different possible crossings were of the Red Sea. But it also shows you, if you, and I can't remember, I don't have mine right here with me, these different countries that they talked about. Moab, Edom, these are all of this area that they're going to be going into and going to be conquering soon. And that's, right now, they have all the energy in the world, all the gusto, everything they've got is going for the Lord. But it's not very long before they lose that. They just can't seem to hang on to it for very long at all. It says, all the inhabitants of Canaan shall melt away. Moses and the children of Israel knew the victory also said something to the enemies of Israel. They would become afraid when they heard of the great things God did for Israel. And they would continue as they heard these different cities, as they, they have to go through their 40 years in the wilderness because of some of the disgrunting things they've had, their disagreements and all that with Moses. We'll get to that eventually here in Exodus, but right now they're riding high on the Red Sea crossing. All this that happens, it talks about here that Rahab, like I said earlier, 40 years later, they all listen and hear and understand what had happened. And then after their city falls, they even know for sure their own selves. The enduring truth remains, the Lord shall reign forever and ever. It says this song of Moses echoes all the way through the book of Revelation, where a multitude that has come from great suffering has experienced great victory and stands on the shores of a great sea singing this song. This is really mimicking what happened on the Red Sea. It's going to be similar to what happens in, at the end times, because all the people are going to be praising God in the end days. Verse 19. For the horse of Pharaoh went in with his chariots and with his horsemen into the sea, and the Lord brought again the waters of the sea upon them, but the children of Israel went on dry land in the midst of the sea. And Miriam the prophetess, the sister of Aaron, took a timbrel in her hand, and all the women went out after her with timbrels and with dances. And Miriam answered them, Sing ye to the Lord, for he hath triumphed gloriously, the horse and his rider hath he thrown into the sea. One of the things that we had talked about earlier is his sister Miriam was the one that went and showed the princess of Egypt. They put him out in the basket in the Nile, and she was the one that went and got the basket and got her mother to nurse him. This is that same, as far as we know, the only sister, Miriam, that he had. It's only one named, at least.
Well, if he had more, he probably wouldn't know that anyway.
Well, he would have come back. When he came back, they would have, but it's not mentioned anywhere else. And it also says, this is the first time that we see that Miriam, it calls her a prophetess. Prophetess. I can't say that very well. That she had some kind of prophetic gift, and later she used that to that purpose to help, the people. But then later on, she got a little big head, and we'll see that later on in some of the other books as we go through that. If you want to read it, it's in Numbers 12. She actually challenges the authority of Moses. But based on what Miriam did, all the women, they had their own little choir. It said they got together and they started singing their own songs. And that kind of concludes, as far as that part, the singing, and we continue on their journey. So Moses brought Israel from the Red Sea, and there they went out into the wilderness of Shur. And they went 3 days into the wilderness and found no water. So if you go on, and if you look on your map that you have, it's on the Nile River, the Red Sea kind of comes up, and there's two forks on it, kind of a western fork. We know that as the Gulf of Suez now, and then a right fork, and that's the Gulf of Aqaba. We think that's where they crossed. So you're down in the bottom of the peninsula, and as you cross over there, then you go out into a big wilderness. And they went 3 days out there into the wilderness. Now, it's not here, but humanly, why was 3 days relevant? Why do you think 3 days is about as long as a human can go without water? Now, they may have had some supplies there, but they ran out pretty quick. They couldn't, with 2 million people, what we think was 2 million people, it's going to take a lot of water every day to keep them going. And their cattle, and their animals, and everything else. They're going to have water. So they found no water. It says this 3 days is not a very long time, but it's long enough to forget about the victory and power of God. And they did. It was only 3 days hence that they found that. And says the Egyptians, they found enough water, and even too much of it. When they went into the Red Sea, they were drowned. But the Israelites had no water. So is it with the wicked man. He often has enough of wealth and too much of it till he is drowned in his sensual delights and perishes in the floods of prosperity. That's from Spurgeon, that comment is. So the people go to Moses. They call upon him. They find this little lake, but the water is bitter, it says. Verse 23. And when they came to Marah, they could not drink of the waters of Marah. So it was some sort of lake there, for they were bitter. Therefore the name of it was called Marah. The people murmured against Moses, saying, What shall we drink? And he cried unto the Lord, and the Lord showed him a tree, which when he had cast into the waters were made sweet. There he made for them a statue and an ordinance. So it's kind of like when you're traveling around in the desert and you start to see mirages and things. Well, they come upon this water, and of course the first thing people want to do is run down there and start drinking it. And they probably did. But it said the waters was bitter. Now, we're not real sure. I mean, we know today what lakes are around there. And just like the Dead Sea is so salty that you will actually float on it. Now, a freshwater, if you go in a swimming pool that's freshwater, you're not going to soak. You'll float, you can float, but because the body is made up of 75% water, but salt water is denser, okay? Because it's denser, then your body is actually lighter. The water in it is lighter, and you'll float without hardly any at all, any compensation. I've seen some pictures of people out there swimming in it, and I mean, it's just like almost half their body's out of the water because of that. And they call it the Dead Sea because it is salt. Well, we think of sodium chloride, the way the table salt we have, but it could be potassium chloride, it could be magnesium chloride, it could be any type of the salts that makes up that lake. And that's the Dead Sea, is what I'm talking about. Well, this one could have been the very same way. Magnesium chloride, you don't want to drink anything like that because it's nasty. I mean, just like salt water. You can drink a little bit of it, but if you drink very much, it's going to make you more thirsty. It's not going to, because it's salty, and you're not going to want it very much because it'll make you puke. If that's the way we always said, you drink very much of it. That's why they don't drink the seawater out when the sailors are at sea, because your body can't process that salty water. Well, this was a combination, they think, of several salts that was there. Let's see if I can find the piece. Oh, here it is. There's a commentator called Buckingham, and he explains the chemicals in the sap of the broken limb drew the mineral content down to the bottom of the pools and left only good water on top. He's speculating of what might have happened. And he further says that the waters were now drinkable, but there was significant magnesium and calcium content in the water. If ever, don't want to get gross, but has anybody ever had a colonoscopy? One of the things they tell you, if you don't take that big jug of fluid they have, is a magnesium, a bottle of magnesium, I can't think of it, stearate, I think it is. I'm not sure what it is. But you drink that, boy, and it'll work on you. It'll clean you out. Well, that's what it says here. The laxative effect of this would clean out the digestive systems of the children of Israel. Okay, cleansing them of the common Egyptian ailments, such as amoebic dysentery and bilharzia. I don't know what that is. It says a weakening disease common among the Egyptian peasants. In addition, calcium and magnesium together form a basis of a drug called dolomite. It's also a rock. And that is used by athletes to help them perform in hot weather conditions. So by God leading them to this bitter water and then causing it to be able to be drinkable, but still it has an effect on them, it gets them ready for the desert. Because they're going to be wandering around here for 40 days, I mean ultimately 40 years, but they're going to be wandering around for a long time until they get to the promised land. So the Lord has to get them ready. you gotta understand, they were in Egypt, they were doing hard work, a lot of them, but that was mainly the men. The women were doing the housework, and that's not easy work, I understand that. That's hard work too, making the food and everything. But all of them, even the children and the old people, had to go through this. God's getting them ready so they can take this trip, because they had to leave so quickly. So Mara provided the right medicine to both clean out their systems and prepare them for the long, hot march to Sinai. Here it says the medieval commentators delighted to see a reference to the cross when it talks about a tree by which the bitterest of life's waters was sweetened. You could use that as a type and shadow that the tree also was saved the Israelites in their time of need. Okay, the last part of 25 through 27, and there he proved them, and said, if thou wilt diligently hearken to the voice of the Lord thy God, and will do that which is right in his sight, and will give ear to his commandments, and keep all his statutes, I will put none of these diseases upon thee, which I have brought upon the Egyptians. For I am the Lord that healeth thee. And there came to Elam, and they came to Elam, where there were 12 wells of water, 70 palm trees, and they encamped there by the waters. So by following God and going through this, and then finally going to this place called Elam, they found water and wells and shade and everything. So they set up their tents there. And they, he tested them through this particular part by taking them through the waters and taking them through the desert. And it was just, again, showing them that all the idolatry that was in Egypt, all that they did, all the different gods, they're nothing compared to what God was and is. And that they need to get rid of all those if they haven't already. But they keep seeming to fall back. They want to go back to their old ways. Change is really hard for us. We don't like it. We like to do the same thing every week, maybe occasionally have a little bit of difference, but you change it very much and people don't like it at all. You want to move? Nobody wants to move. You want to move houses? You want to do things like that? No, nobody wants to do that.
It gets us out of our comfort zone.
It does. It very much, and that's what people, you have to do something different, and you don't know what's going to happen, if you'll like it or not. And that's what God wants us to do. Sometimes we may not like it, but we have to still do it. There are a lot of things that I'm not really particularly fond of doing, but I know they need to be done. Because if it's not, something's going to tear up or fall down or whatever. So we have, that's right, anything like that. And the last part of this, where it tells them that he will put none of these diseases upon them, noted that God's laws to Israel, later on in Exodus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, they had a direct impact on the hygiene and the health of Israel. Goes through and tells them about eating the clean animals and all these, the circumcision they had, all these things, keeping away from other people. This was setting Israel up to be a people set apart. And it was for their purpose, to keep them healthy, to keep them, a lot of the things that were going on then, especially in Egypt, they didn't want to be a part of it. So God set up later on these rules and laws that God gave to them, what to do. So this gave them, help in that ways. And it says beyond the direct medical implications, obedience also means we are at peace with God. Whenever God tells us they're getting there, God's telling us to do something, okay, we do it. Following the cloud by day and the fire by night, as they did that, and then it settled down, okay, it's time to settle down. So they'd have to settle down. Once they get kind of settled in a place, God said, okay, let's go somewhere else. As they got used to that, God was going back and forth with them, showing them they're used to relying upon him. And that's what God wants. He wants them to be reliant upon him. That way they can't say it's mine. You know, I did this or so and so did this. But it's God did this. Just like the song that we studied at the first part of the chapter was all about God. Now it's starting to get away from that a little bit.
What does it make you think of? Because nowadays, what are we supposed to do? Stay away from people.
Well, we can't stay away from everybody.
I know, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, I know.
They
I know.
separate us when we didn't want to be separated.
That's right.
In verse 27, I kind of find it interesting
Mm-hmm.
that there were 12 wells of water,
Mm-hmm.
one for each tribe.
That's
So
right.
it was 12 tribes.
Right.
And then it says 70 palm trees, that's 70. And then
Mhm.
wasn't there 70 originally that went into Egypt from Jacob's
Yes.
relatives and everybody?
I
So
believe that's right.
So,
70
you know,
souls.
You've got those numbers again.
Exactly.
That are so important.
It
all
is.
throughout Bible, 12,
Mhm.
70, you know.
It makes sense. Later on, as we talked about in Revelation, you know, there's 12 sets, 12 for the 12 tribes and 12 for the 12 apostles. And, you know, it just goes back and forth, all these different numbers that do play a big part on it. And to us, we say, okay, that's 12 wells. Good. Well, like you said, one for each tribe. You could have it separated at that particular time. We don't know how many was of each tribe, but that wouldn't be it. Like I said, it's going to take a lot of water. If you take, and they say right now today, I think and we use a lot more water probably than they did, but probably a gallon a day for each person. So 2 million gallons a day.
Gosh.
Well, and the livestock.
Exactly. The livestock, they can drink a lot more. The camels and the horses and the pigs and the cows. Well, they wouldn't have any pigs, but all that, it would take a lot. That's a lot of water that they have to draw. I mean, even though they have the wells, that's a lot of work to do. That they got to draw that water up and get it out. That's right. Take care of it.
Well, and besides the drinking, I feel quite confident they needed some extra for the bathing.
Bathing, washing,
Just everything.
cleaning whatever they could find to eat, their utensils, boiling water. I don't know if they had coffee back then. Had some form of some kind of drink, I'm sure, that they had to use water as a base. I'm not sure.
Well, I even wondered, even though the water was made to where they could drink it,
Mhm.
was there an abundance for them to do, the bathing and cleaning, or was it just enough for drinking? I mean,
There are times I do know, you know, we see it so many times when it's talking about it. As they came in, they would wash their feet as they came into a house. And when they'd go out and work all day, they'd eat breakfast, and then they'd go out and work all day and then come back. Well, that means, you know, to us, we go outside and work on the yard for 2 hours and we're sweating like a pig. We could come in and bathe. They didn't. They got, and then they ate their dinner and they went to bed and then they got up the next day. Boy, could you imagine after about a week of that? That would be pretty.
We want to separate.
You would want to separate.
Always.
Well, I'm sure they bathed some like that. Then they had to wash their clothes, like you said, and clean them, keep them
And you
going.
said beating on the rocks.
It's just a lot. Yeah, it's a lot of water that they have for that
Come a
many
long way,
people.
haven't we? Yeah, because those people worked hard, they didn't have any conveniences at all.
One of the things it does talk about, we talked about a few weeks ago, is the names of God. Here it says, here in Elam, God revealed himself as Jehovah Rapha. Whatever you need, God will be there. God will provide. And that's what it means. Israel had no miracle at Elam. Wells and palm trees they had, but they had no miracle there. No miraculous change of the bitter into the sweet. They had no statues, no ordinances, no promise, and no new revelation of God, and no new name for Jehovah there. So we see that sometimes we are challenged And as we overcome that challenge, then there's a time for rest. And this was their time for rest. They had gone 3 days plus in the wilderness and got to this resting place, and God gave them a resting place in Elim. God gave them what they needed for a little while, and gave them for when they go on. Because they've been on the, and it's got back there on that map, it's got a little time frame estimating the days, so many days to here and so many days. So we're about, I think it's 17, 18 days out from when they left Egypt, maybe 20. So it's a little ways away from it. But it's long enough that they can start forgetting already. And we'll see that next week and the week following, so.
Wow.
Are we supposed to wave to Bill?
Oh yeah, you guys wanna wave to Bill? Bill said, if he's on,
Hi,
Brother
Bill.
Adams Sunday said, well, you didn't wave, I saw you Wednesday night, but you didn't wave at me.
He waved at me. He's a character, boy. We love you, Brother Bill.
Well, that's about all I have.